Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998 in the small Swedish town of Havdi. It was a quiet and peaceful place where she lived with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing school, she decided she wanted to go to Australia and study architecture. Lisa also traveled a lot with her parents, visiting many other countries. She was also quite independent. Since her teenage years, Lisa had been working at various part-time jobs to earn some money on her own. Before the summer of 2015, when Lisa was 17, she finally got a serious job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from her home. For the first few weeks, her parents drove her there, but soon her father decided to buy her a scooter. Lisa had a license for this type of transport, while she could only get a car license after turning 18. She was happy with this gift because she wanted to commute to work on her own. But for the first few weeks, her father accompanied her in his car since Lisa had almost no experience driving on the roads. She only worked weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This went on until June 7th, when he finally let her drive to the cafe alone. Somewhere around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was pretty crowded, so Lisa was really busy with work. She took a short break for lunch, had a snack with her parents, and they went back home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa texted her father that she was leaving work, but 3 minutes later, he received a call from her. He picked up, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought Lisa had dialed his number accidentally. The father thought she was talking to her colleagues and also heard the sound of a car door slamming shut. He called Lisa's name several times with no answer, then ended the call and began waiting for her to get home. But she didn't show up. An hour passed, and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father feared Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove at a slow pace, scanning the road. But Lisa was nowhere to be found. The man eventually reached the cafe without finding his daughter. Upon arriving at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By that moment, the man was already in a state of panic, having been unable to find his daughter the entire way. Seeing her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that for some reason, she had been delayed at work. However, there was no one in the cafe, and the man noticed something else. Lisa's scooter keys were left in the ignition, with a helmet hanging from its handle. All of this led him to believe that something bad had happened to his daughter. She would have never left the keys in the scooter, abandoning it in the parking lot unattended. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts. But the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her car and headed there. On the way, she called 4 of her friends, who lived nearby, and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this version was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her relatives immediately contacted the police. By that time, it was almost 10 p.m., and it was already dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but it yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's disappearance to the public, urging anyone who had useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man who came to work at a barn right across from the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, but they hadn't noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove indeed belonged to their daughter. This further supported the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By that time, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread throughout the country, and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. On Tuesday, police received several more alarming clues. Volunteers searched the area along the dirt road located a few hundred yards from the cafe. There, they found a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. Investigators immediately determined that all these items belonged to Lisa and focused the search in that area. Soon, they found other parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and several more receipts. All these items were scattered along the same dirt road. After the discovery of those pieces of evidence, the police became almost certain that Lisa had become a victim of abduction. They threw all available resources into the search, and with each passing day, more and more people joined in. This case became the main news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers flocked from all over the country to participate in the search. A local volunteer organization specializing in finding missing people also joined the effort. All of this made Lisa's search operation the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 people participating in total. The police also received numerous calls with tips. One woman recounted that she went for a jog the day before Lisa's disappearance. At some point, a man who stood next to his car stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get into his car and show the route on his navigator. Naturally, the woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared one interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had already seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed two men standing across the road from the cafe, looking towards the establishment. She didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The next morning on Wednesday, Lisa's father, along with some friends, went to search the dirt road where her belongings were found. Walking a bit further, he made several more alarming discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It all seemed as if Lisa was being taken along this road away from the cafe while the abductor was throwing her belongings out of their car or other vehicle they used to kidnap her. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. Passing by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. The man decided to go inside and look for any other clues once more. He grabbed a flashlight from his car as it was already getting dark outside and walked around the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his attention. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring and another one just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that these pieces of jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detective later explained that on the day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself, so the barn was inspected not so thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings, but now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time, they noticed a rather unusual piece of evidence. Behind one of the walls, the police found human feces. At a glance, it may seem unrelated to the case, but the forensic experts put forward a quite interesting theory. They explained that when criminals commit serious and horrible crimes, their bodies produce an extreme amount of adrenaline, which sometimes leads to the uncontrollable need to relieve themselves. For example, it's common for killers to wet themselves before or during the murder. Considering that Lisa's glove and earrings were found in the barn, the police theorized that if she was indeed abducted, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives didn't rule out the possibility that this person, under the influence of adrenaline, couldn't hold it and relieve themselves, so these feces were sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers reached a farm located about 2 miles from the cafe. It was a complex of several large buildings where many people worked, and the search team decided to inspect them all. However, shortly after they arrived, 2 men came to the farm. They didn't speak Swedish and communicated only in English. One of them said that the police had already been at this farm, but the search team leader didn't rush to believe it. He thought he would have known about it if that were the case, so he decided to continue the search. The 2 men walked around the farm for a while, watching the volunteers, and eventually drove away. About an hour later, Members of the search team found a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Under it, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. The police immediately arrived at the scene and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent forensic experts to the farm for a more thorough search. Detectives also heard the story about the two strange men who tried to dissuade the volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who encountered a suspicious man speaking English while jogging. In fact, they already had an idea who it might be. From the first days of the search, they had visited all the houses near the cafe, and in one of them lived two brothers from Lithuania along with the wife of one of them. All three didn't speak Swedish and communicated in English. They were the only people within several miles who didn't speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked in the barn across the road from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations, and the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were found led to their house. Considering that there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all three of them. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm. Together with the volunteers, they continued to inspect this area, and soon, their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened, as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden, and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. On the same day that her body was discovered, something unusual and rather eerie occurred. YouTube users stumbled upon a video posted 13 days before the murder. The video was titled 13, and it featured a countdown timer. What was most unsettling was the name of the channel that uploaded the video. It was called Lisa Home. News of this video quickly spread throughout the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some people began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but in reality, it turned out to be much simpler. It appeared that someone had just changed the channel name and video title after Lisa's body was found. Either this person wanted to spark another conspiracy theory or was just playing a cruel prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in two brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home, providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Nergis, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Nergis also added that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to the gas station, where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all three could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still lacked any evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, utilizing all available resources and manpower, and soon their efforts paid off. In the barn, there was a small office-like room. It had a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon examining this room, experts discovered 15 different traces of male semen on the walls and floor near this window. It appeared as if someone had stood there watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and satisfying themselves. These semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of the older brother, 35-year-old Nergis. The same applied to the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, Forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Nergis. On the floor beneath the pipe, they discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Nergis's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence came from her jacket. DNA traces belonging to Nergis were also found on it. Based on this evidence, the police believed that she was killed right there. They pieced together an approximate sequence of events. Nergis had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he could have asked Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactics. Then, Nergis might have asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Considering Lisa was kind-hearted and always tried to help others, she might have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hung her from the pipe. According to the medical experts, this sight likely excited him so much that he defecated on the floor due to an adrenaline rush. When she died, he placed Lisa's body in the car and drove to the farm, tossing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Nergis continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Nergis claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother. Although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources, in court this could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Nergis's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his car near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the car passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times at the same time when Nergis was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Nergis's DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Nergis's involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Nergis actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Nergis whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Nergis explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it. But after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Nergis's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing to his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Nergis's younger brother. According to this theory, The brother somehow took multiple samples of Narcis's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month, and Narcis was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict, but the appeal was rejected. In early 2017, Narcis himself applied for deportation and transfer to a prison in his homeland. The reasons for this decision were unknown. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones, yet the court decided to approve his request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention costs Swedish taxpayers several $100s per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear. He appealed to a Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer. A few weeks later, the court overturned its decision, and Narcis was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now, he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Narcis faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Narcis with a shank. He suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder. In that case, experts would have found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew of her husband's crime and helped him evade justice by providing a false alibi. Narcis's younger brother also raises questions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them. Considering that one of them was likely Narcis himself, the other should have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found either in the barn itself or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. Perhaps they were indeed observing the young employees with the older brother and even discussing inappropriate things, but only Narcis decided to commit such a heinous crime. The case of the Chavez Lopez family. On the morning of December 2, 1991, in Ecatepec, Mexico, a mariachi returning from his nightly work was walking home as usual. On his way, he encountered a young boy wandering the street alone. The child was dirty, as if covered in mud, and the mariachi wondered why a child in such a state was alone on the street. He recognized the boy as the youngest son of the Chavez Lopez family, known for having one of the biggest and most spectacular houses in the Jardines de Morelos neighborhood. The mariachi's first question to the boy was why he was dirty and where his mother was. The boy, 3 years old, could walk and talk but not clearly, making it difficult to understand him. The child seemed calm, likely not understanding what had actually happened, and told the mariachi that a doctor had operated his mother at home, and then she didn't wake up again. This sounded strange to the mariachi, who realized that the boy was not covered in mud, but in blood. What had really happened was beyond the boy's limited understanding of the world, and he couldn't explain what he had witnessed. Confused, the mariachi decided to take the boy to his own home, where his wife was waiting. She knew more about the Chavez Lopez family and knew the boy's name was Alejandro. Shocked by Alejandro's appearance, she and her husband decided to go to Alejandro's house to find out why his parents had left him in such a state. Upon arriving, they noted that the house looked strange. The front door and a patio door were open, suggesting someone was inside, but the curtains were drawn and the lights were off, giving the impression that the family wasn't home or was sleeping. The couple debated entering, but felt uneasy about the vibe of the house. They decided to seek help from another neighbor who lived across from the Chavez Lopez family. By then, the situation had become a scandal among the neighbors, all of whom were wondering what was happening. Yet, none dared to enter the house until the officials arrived. In the meantime, they could only help by cleaning the boy, noticing he had a recent wound under his armpit that had stopped bleeding. Given the dried, darkened blood on the boy, initially mistaken for mud, it was inferred that whatever had happened occurred several hours earlier. Shortly after, a police patrol arrived, and the testimony of the 2 officers about what they saw inside conveyed the terror they felt each time they thought about it. Upon entering the house, they immediately sensed a heavy atmosphere. The main living area was dark, and no one was visible, so they decided to go upstairs where the bedrooms were located. Hearing the sound of a television in the distance, they headed towards the room it was coming from. They found the door to the room was jammed. Not by the lock, but because something was blocking it from the inside. With some effort, they managed to open the door and were horrified to discover the bodies of a man and a woman blocking it. Both were on the floor, one on top of the other in a blood-soaked room. The officers, unaccustomed to such gruesome scenes and without bullets in their guns, were left speechless and hastily exited the house. Visibly shaken, they stood for a few seconds leaning against their patrol car, and one of the officers called for backup, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. About 20 minutes later, several police patrols arrived, and the officers, equipped with flashlights, began to examine the house. They knew about the two bodies in the upstairs room, but first wanted to check the ground floor for a better understanding of what had happened. To their surprise, the rest of the house appeared orderly, contrary to their expectations of a burglary gone wrong in a high-class family's home. There were no signs of a break-in or a thief searching for valuables. Not finding any abnormalities on the ground floor and under orders not to disturb the scene before the forensic experts arrived, the officers first examined the room with the TV and the lifeless bodies. The victims were quickly identified as Alejandro and Fip Chavez Lopez, the homeowners. The crime scene was indescribable. The knife, the apparent weapon, was used multiple times on the victims, resulting in blood covering the floor, walls, and bed. A shoot print on the bed and the deseret in the room suggested that the Chavez-Lopez couple had fought for their lives. Surprisingly, in the room was a bag containing credit cards, checkbooks, and jewelry, indicating that robbery was not the motive. It seemed the crime was driven by hatred towards this specific family, raising the question of who could have done this to such hardworking people, both of whom were school teachers. Everyone spoke highly of the Chavez-Lopez family. Alejandro, the father, was an entrepreneurial man, though a teacher by profession. His passion was business. He was well known in the impoverished neighborhood for his large house, which stood out. He understood the importance of networking for business success, often attending meetings and parties where he made connections with influential people, helping him rise to the top of the community. 33, he already owned 2 large schools, which provided him with a good income, and he had no intention of stopping. Besides teaching, Alejandro's other passion was cars. With his experience in restoring automobiles, he aspired to establish a garage and had already acquired the land for it. Unfortunately, Alejandro could never realize this dream. His wife, Phoebe, was known for her beauty and assisted Alejandro in the administrative aspects of his businesses. She had a daughter, Lorena, from a previous relationship. Lorena, 13 years old and distinct in appearance from her siblings, was treated as Alejandro's own daughter, even taking his surname. The other children, Jasmine, 10 years old, Erica, 8 years old, and Alejandro Jr., 3 years old, were from Phoebe and Alejandro's marriage. Despite the Chavez-Lopez house's spectacular exterior, it was poorly designed with an unfinished kitchen and only 1 bathroom. This was a result of prioritizing the house's facade and luxury cars over practicality. Alejandro liked to maintain a sense of superiority, differentiating himself from others. This trait led people to speculate that envy might have motivated the crime. Family's day began at 4:30 a.m. to accommodate everyone using the single bathroom. Alejandro, not satisfied with the local school standards, sent his children to a school 2 hours away, resulting in much of their day spent in the car. He also avoided mingling with neighbors due to economic disparities, leading to his children being isolated and not playing with other kids in the neighborhood. Alejandro was particularly protective of Lorena, noticing that some older men were trying to woo her, despite her being only 13. Sadly, their end was truly tragic. The crime scene in the main bedroom was shocking, leading the officers to examine the other bedrooms with heavy hearts. The first room they entered, adorned in pastel colors, appeared to belong to Lorena, with clothes and various items scattered around. They noticed a sports shoe without laces and cigarette ashes on the bed, along with a bear-shaped lamp missing its cable. There were no signs of blood or the girls. In the next room, they found a body under the sheets, surrounded by blood. Underneath was Lorena's lifeless body with multiple wounds and hands tied with the shoelaces from the sports shoe in the previous room. The last room, more of a storage area without windows, held the lifeless bodies of Erica and Jasmine, their hands bound with the cable from Lorena's bear-shaped lamp. Alejandro Jr., the 3-year-old, was the sole survivor of this massacre. Due to his young age, he couldn't provide reliable testimony, only repeating that a doctor had operated on his mother. Pressuring him for more information would only cause further psychological harm. At that time in Ecatepec, 9 out of 10 crimes went unpunished, leaving residents frustrated with frequent home invasions, robberies, and threats. However, a crime as horrific as this had never occurred before in the area. Causing public outreach, people took to the streets in protest in front of police stations and the courthouse, injured by the lack of progress made by the authorities. The situation was further inflamed by negative newspaper headlines criticizing the police. Adding to the pressure, one of Phoebe's sisters was dating the son of the governor at the time, compelling the police to resolve this crime at any cost. The officers in charge were even threatened with job loss if they failed to solve the case. The police surmised that there were likely multiple assailants involved, as Alejandro was athletically built and his body indicated he had been overpowered. Since no doors or windows were forced open, it was assumed the murderer might have entered through the balcony. The murders occurred between 1 and 3 a.m. Another disturbing detail was that Lorena had been assaulted. The police needed to investigate further the fact that the entire family had attended a party for the daughter of a swimming instructor at one of Alejandro's schools. They left the party around 10 p.m., and a family friend drove Phoebe and the children home since Alejandro continued drinking with a friend at another location. At 11 p.m., Alejandro and his friend entered a bar where they drank large amounts of whiskey and rum. Alejandro attempted to leave with a dancer nicknamed Vicky, but she declined and instead left with his friend. Around 1:30 a.m., the friend and Vicky decided to go to a hotel, but first dropped Alejandro at his home. Given the timing, the police began to suspect Vicky and the friend, Salvador Galarza, whose statements were inconsistent. Initially, he claimed he saw Alejandro enter his house, but an investigation revealed that Alejandro, having forgotten his keys and being drunk, decided to enter through the balcony. This explained why one of his shoes was found there. Salvador failed to mention that Alejandro had a mistress who was investigated but seemed unrelated to the crime. After thoroughly investigating Salvador's actions that night, he also appeared not to be the culprit, with his inconsistent testimonies likely due to being extremely drunk. The investigation was exhaustive, with even Phoebe's brother, Doctor, being interrogated, since the child mentioned a doctor operated on his mother. The police explored this lead, along with any other slight clue. They also questioned individuals Alejandro had affected, which were not few in number. For Alejandro, money was paramount, and he didn't hesitate to step on others to achieve his goals. He had recently dismissed several employees from his school without proper severance pay. This issue even reached the courts, but Alejandro won, which many attributed to corruption, as he was acquainted with the judge. Additionally, when constructing the school's swimming pool, he hired an architect but refused to pay after receiving the plans, secretly making copies and having the pool built by other workers. He was also known for stealing business ideas from others in his circle and was infamous for various scams, often not paying when he could get away with it. Lorena's diary revealed that the children were unhappy with the strict lifestyle imposed by their parents. She felt out of place, unable to play with neighborhood kids due to her father's disdain for lower economic classes. She also didn't fit in at her upscale school, where she was mocked for wearing old, outdated clothes and not indulging in luxuries like her classmates. Teachers at the school confirmed Lorena and her sisters were isolated, not mingling with others. This diary entry painted a different picture of Alejandro, contrasting the hard-working image he had cultivated. Despite having the means, he preferred spending on mistresses, alcohol, cars, and maintaining a high-class image, neglecting his children's needs for better clothing and entertainment. Weeks passed without any leads, as there were no security cameras, DNA evidence, or witnesses. Then, on March 17, 1992, the police received an anonymous call from a woman claiming to know the identity of the Chavez Lopez family's murderer, Jose Julio Cipriano Luna, a local metal worker who knew Alejandro. She alleged that the day after the murders, Cipriano stayed near her house, and his clothes, when washed, were covered in blood. In the following days, he was visibly ill, often vomiting. When asked why she delayed reporting this, the woman said she saw Cipriano returning to his old ways and felt it was time. Someone stopped him. She refused further contact, only providing the suspect's supposed address before hanging up. Jose Julio Cipriano Luna, 28 years old, lived in Ecatepec, close to Alejandro's residence. Alejandro, for his automobile restoration projects, required metalworking services, which led him to do business with Cipriano. This connection made Cipriano a person of interest to the police, but they faced a significant hurdle. The anonymous call was not strong enough evidence to incriminate Cipriano, and it was discovered that he lived in another municipality. This posed a jurisdictional issue for the Ecatepec police. At that time, there were no cooperation agreements between police forces, or they required judicial intervention, which could delay the process and risk the suspect fleeing or harming another victim. The only option was to steal the suspect, meaning to detain him in a location outside their jurisdiction for interrogation, hoping for a confession. If they couldn't prove the suspect's culpability immediately, they had to release him. If found guilty, he could then be taken to the appropriate jurisdiction. However, if the local police caught them in the act, their careers could be jeopardized. Despite the risks, on March 20th, 1992, 3 officers, Andres Garcia Bonilla, Arturo Martinez, and Ernesto Camarena, decided to carry out this operation in his municipality. They went undercover, avoiding bathing, wearing dirty clothes, and keeping their hair long to blend into the impoverished area. They only had the suspect's name from an anonymous call. Their plan was to inquire about a metal worker near the provided address. However, they soon realized that many in the area were metal workers. As time was against them, the officers came up with the idea of checking the transparent boxes displaying business permits, which were publicly visible and contained the owners' surnames. In one of these boxes, they found the name Cipriano Luma, when Camarena, who was alone and unarmed at that moment, asked nearby individuals about the metalworker's whereabouts. He received curt and hostile responses, being told that Cipriano no longer worked there and to ask elsewhere. Guided by intuition and the information from the anonymous call that Cipriano lived in his parents' house, the officers eventually found the house and inquired about the metalworker. The officers approached a man who, with suspicion, asked why they were looking for his son. Fortunately, the car the officers were using was damaged, and they managed to convince the man that they needed metalworking services. Believing their story, he informed them that his son, the metalworker, no longer lived there, but was now residing with his mother-in-law. He gave them directions to the new address. After about an hour, the officers located the place. With fewer metal workers around, they inquired about one and were approached by a man in his mid-20s. Fitting the suspect's description, the challenge now was to get him into the car willingly. Officer Camarena, pretending ignorance about the suspect's identity, fabricated a story about an issue with an engineer to which the suspect, Cipriano, surprisingly admitted he owed money to an engineer and agreed to discuss it in the car. Once in the vehicle, the officers drove to a secluded area to confront him, hoping for a confession. They avoided mentioning the murders initially, engaging in small talk to ease into the conversation. When they reached the isolated spot, Camarena asked the other officers to step away, intending to speak to Cipriano one-on-one without intimidating him. Unsure how to get Cipriano to talk about the case, Camarena showed him a photo of the Chavez Lopez family. Cipriano's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes widened dramatically, betraying his shock. He tried to maintain composure, denying knowing the family. Officer Camarena confronted him directly about his involvement in the crime, leading Cipriano to break down and offer 10 million pesos for his release, claiming the money was at his father's house. Camarena cleverly did not immediately accept or reject the offer, but asked for the location of his father's house, confirming it was the same house they had visited earlier. Pressing further about why Cipriano was so eager to bribe him, Cipriano became visibly nervous. Realizing he had trapped Cipriano, Camarena finally got him to confess to committing the crime. The details Cipriano provided about the house, the timing, and the condition of the bodies deeply disturbed Officer Camarena. He had become obsessed with the case, meticulously investigating every aspect, and learning the gruesome specifics from Cipriano turned his stomach. Cipriano also revealed he had 2 accomplices, one of whom had assaulted Lorena. This new information meant that the police now needed more physical evidence to track down the other 2 culprits. During the investigation, Phoebe's sister was asked to check the Chavez Lopez house for missing items. Among the few things stolen were a video cassette recorder and a gold pendant that she had given to Phoebe. These items were later found at Cipriano's house, confirming his involvement. Cipriano confessed the motive behind orchestrating the murders was rooted in his resentment towards Alejandro. Alejandro had hired Cipriano, a humble metalworker, to restore one of his cars. At one point, Alejandro felt that Cipriano was taking too long to finish the job and decided to retrieve his car from the garage without paying Cipriano the owed 600,000 pesos, equivalent roughly $100. Cipriano harbored deep resentment and anger towards Alejandro, who flaunted his wealth yet refused to pay for services rendered. This resentment grew into fantasies of revenge, which materialized when Cipriano met others who also despised Alejandro. One accomplice, Alejandro Cruz, 18, was a street vendor, while the other was Adam Robledo, 20 years old. On December 1st, 1991, the day before the murders, the three suspects attended the same party as the Chavez Lopez family. Alejandro was the center of attention at the event, laughing and drinking with his friend. During the night, Cipriano approached Alejandro to ask for the money he was owed, only to be dismissed and told he wouldn't be paid as the job was incomplete. Later that night, Adam, who was infatuated with 13-year-old Lorena, began talking to her. Upon discovering this, Alejandro confronted Adam, berating him and asserting that he had no right to consider himself Lorena's equal or to be near her. Alejandro, tired of the tensions at the party, decided to leave around 10 p.m. Shortly after his departure, a commotion erupted at the party. Adam, who had been pursuing Lorena, was caught with his pants down, assaulting another girl. This scandal quickly spread through the party, resulting in Cipriano, Cruz, and Adam fleeing after stealing kitchen knives for self-defense. Later, as they wandered the neighborhood drunk, they came across Alejandro's house around 2:30 a.m. Cipriano, filled with rage at the sight of Alejandro's wealth and remembering his unpaid debt, decided to take action. Still angry about how Alejandro had treated him earlier, agreed. The third accomplice, Cruz, skilled in picking locks, enabled them to enter the house, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. Adam, exhibiting psychopathic tendencies, even took the time to smoke a cigarette in Lorena's bed after committing the heinous acts. Alejandro, too intoxicated to fight back, was defenseless against the attackers armed with knives. The confessions of the criminals, along with the testimonies of Adam and Cruz, who were quickly apprehended, corroborated the entire story. Each of the three men was sentenced to 250 years in a maximum security prison. The gold pendant found in Cipriano's possession was a critical piece of evidence in the trial. They were confirmed as monstrous individuals, with their confession revealing they hadn't seen any children in the house as they committed the crimes in the dark. This likely spared the life of 3-year-old Alejandro Jr., who was sleeping in his crib at the time. The child later told his grandfather that he had climbed out of his crib, which explained his injury, and unsuccessfully tried to wake his parents before leaving the house. He was eventually found by the mariachi. While Alejandro had made several enemies, the extent of the crime committed by these criminals was far beyond any reasonable retribution for his actions. To end on a positive note, Officer Camarena was recognized and promoted for his work in solving the case, a deserving accolade given the gravity and complexity of the investigation. The case of Lynette Vonda Pontius. Lynette Pontius was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with two brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette was very active, sociable, and cheerful, so she was always popular in every group of friends. She was also very attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby, and he disappeared and ignored all attempts to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always kept a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believed that he would be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just two young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, Everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was not his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite this, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in February 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin had proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially publicized her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. First, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit him on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which an armed man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Pontius. She was the only person with a motive against him. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly began to control things, and she wanted more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutally when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered her. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at Martin and Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin might owe large sums of money to criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his time with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him sometime before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack on Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or on mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method, as long as Martin died, so that she could gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted to driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, saying that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believed Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in February 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died. She just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with her. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions from Joseph, the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, portraying herself as a victim. This tactic aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed. She only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to attempt to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for Women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon, but no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hopes she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Jodi Arias, a charismatic young woman in her 20s. She was a gorgeous blonde with a smart personality and witty mind. She was born on July 9, 1980 in Salinas, California. She was the most loved child among her 4 brothers and sisters. Her parents adored her in every possible manner. She loved photography and had taken up this hobby to start a career in it. She left her high school and began her career as a full-time photographer. But certainly life had other plans for her. Despite her intense passion for photography, she kept on failing and could not make a living out of it. In order to survive, she had to leave photography. Later, she took up a job as a waitress in a nearby restaurant, but her love for photography never ceased. Jodi was 21 years old when she began working as a waitress in a renowned restaurant in California. It was then when she met her very first boyfriend. Daryl Brewer was a 40-year-old man when he started dating Jodi. Things seemed to be pretty casual at first, but as time passed, both of them came into a serious relationship. The relationship was quite odd as Daryl was older than Jodi. Her friends often told her she deserved better, but still she went on pursuing the relationship anyway. Things were going pretty smooth, and almost a year had passed when Jodi started working at prepaid legal services along with her job as a waitress. Both Jodi and Daryl had moved into a home together in February 2005. So Jodi needed to work 2 jobs in order to keep up with the expenses. This was the time when a young man named Travis Alexander caught Jodi's eye. Daryl and Jodi had major age differences, because of which Jodi was having second thoughts about continuing her relationship with Daryl. She was more prone to cheating and deceiving her boyfriend than anyone else. Her vulnerability spoke volumes, and she found herself attracted to the young man Travis Alexander. Travis Alexander was born on July 28, 1977 in Riverside, California. He was one of the 8 children of his parents, but after his father's untimely death, he was sent to live with his grandparents. Travis was a very religious man and was an avid member of the Mormon Church. He was a motivational speaker alongside a legal insurance salesman at the time he met Jodi. A conference was held in February in Las Vegas, which was attended by both Jodi and Travis. It was not long until Jodi caught the eye of the young speaker. They both had immense interest in one another, which resulted in Jodi's relationship with Daryl crumbling into ashes. Following this attraction between Jodi and Travis, Daryl suffered major consequences as fights began to happen between him and Jodi. He knew for sure that their age difference was a problem, but did not think that it would lead them to a breakup. Few months later, Daryl and Jodi called it quits and Daryl moved out of their shared home. Later, that home, since it wasn't owned by anybody, it went to the foster funds of the community. By February 2006, Travis and Jodi had already started dating. Due to Travis's faith, he baptized Jodi into his Mormon faith, and they both continued to be in a relationship. 5 months later, the couple mysteriously broke up. Travis' friends reported that they were never fond of Jodi, as she was very possessive when it came to her boyfriend. She wanted to mark her territory, as she was more into Travis than he was into her. Her extreme possessiveness led the couple to a breakup. According to several of Travis' friends, Arias would follow him to the bathroom and wait outside the door, eavesdrop on his conversations, and forward his private emails with other people to herself. And that was just the beginning. Alexander's friend, Kyle Lovinger Hughes, told ABC News, "She started seeing things that were just disturbing. I said, Travis, I'm afraid we're going to find you chopped up in her freezer." From very early on, she was completely obsessed with him. Her husband, Chris Hughes, said, on one occasion, Hughes was present when Alexander caught her eavesdropping on him from behind a closed door. There was a rage in her eyes. "Sky and I are very frightened at this point. She might burn down our house, with all of us in it," he said. The shocking thing was that Travis and Jodi kept on having physical relationships even after their breakup. Travis wanted to marry a virgin Mormon girl, whereas he had broken this vow with Jodi. According to him, Jodi was not suitable for marriage anymore, but he did not want to give up on the amazing sexual relations they both had. Meanwhile, Jodi was obsessed with Travis. She had assumed that he was the love of her life. She would stalk him at night. She even moved into the same city as Travis after their breakup. Travis only wanted physical relations while Jodi wanted him all. The secret relationship continued until in February 2007, Travis started dating someone new. This irritated Jody, and she started sending threatening emails to his new girlfriend. She wanted Travis to be his own. She even burst the tires of Travis' cars twice so he would stop going to see that woman he was dating. Many friends advised Travis to stay away from her, but he never listened. The pair continued to exchange flirty texts and emails and kept on with their physical intimacy for the time being. The February was proceeding when Jody and Travis had a huge argument. Jody had tried to break into Travis' Facebook account, which led him to be furious. They both exchanged many hurtful texts, and Travis asked her to stay away from him. This was his final call towards Jody that everything they had was going to end this time. But Jody had other plans for him. It was the month of June when the company Travis worked at arranged a trip to Cancun, Mexico. He was allowed to bring one friend on the trip. Instead of choosing Jody, he chose a woman named Mimi who he was trying to date at that time. This caught Jody by surprise, and she was ready to take an action that would end horribly. Meanwhile, Travis and his new friend Mimi were excited about this trip without even knowing what awaited them. On May 28th, Arias' grandparents' home was burglarized. One of the items that was stolen was a .25 caliber automatic Colt pistol, which was never recovered. Arias tried to get a hold of Alexander on June 2nd, but he did not answer. The two eventually spoke for about 18 minutes on one phone call and on a second one that lasted for 41 minutes. She set out in the early hours of the morning to drive south to rent a car for a trip to Utah. On June 2nd, 2007, the very same day, Jody rented a car and drove to Travis' apartment out of the blue. For some reason, she had taken her camera with her. That day, instead of letting her go, Travis invited her into his apartment. She went in, and the pair had sex many times. They both took many explicit photos of one another through Jody's camera. They both enjoyed a good shower and caressed one another many times. Rekindling her love for photography, she took many photos of Travis. But nobody knew that this would be the last photo of Travis alive. They both shared a good time with one another until Jody decided to end Travis's life out of pure jealousy and hatred for taking another woman to his trip. She stabbed him 27 times and shot him straight into his head until Travis could not breathe anymore. There was blood everywhere in the shower as she had stabbed him while he was taking a shower. After committing such a hideous crime, Jody went on to discard her camera, but unfortunately, she left it in the laundry. The camera had all the evidence and would later be used in the court against Jody. She also went to her apartment and dyed her hair from blonde to brunette in hopes that nobody would recognize her. Many days had passed, and Travis' friends and co-workers got worried after Travis did not show up for his trip. His soon-to-be girlfriend, Mimi, went to check up on him, and to her shock, she found Travis dead in his bathroom. His friends immediately dialed 911 and pointed out Arias as a suspect, citing that Alexander had mentioned she would stalk him, hack his Facebook, and had previously slashed his tires. "A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while," a woman identified as Marie Halley said. "We think he's dead. There's lots of blood. His roommate went in, and there's blood in his bedroom, behind the door, and all over. Then they went in the bathroom, and it's all in the shower." When Mesa Police Detective Esteban Flores arrived on the scene, he told 2020 that blood was everywhere. Photographic evidence showed blood spattered on the sink, walls, and floors. Police also found a bloody palm print outside of Alexander's bedroom. They also found DNA linking areas to the crime scene. She was accused of violently attacking Alexander in a jealous rage after he wanted to end their affair and plan a trip to Mexico with another woman. It was a clear case of homicide. The police started questioning everyone, and the main suspect was Jody. Everybody told the police how she used to constantly stalk Travis out of extreme obsession with him. Meanwhile, Jody voluntarily went to the police station to give her DNA samples and told the police that she had not seen Travis since April. The police knew it was all a white lie, as they had found the camera that had all the evidence of when Jody met Travis. On June 21st, 2008, Travis' funeral was held, and 6 days later, Jody was arrested. Her lies were uncovered as the DNA samples matched a hair strand and blood that was found beside Travis' dead body. Long hours of interrogation were conducted with Jody, but she never confessed to murdering her ex-boyfriend. She was resistant, but the jury had all the evidence they needed to prove her guilty. She gave many interviews and told the story of how Travis was her best friend and how she loved and respected him. She also denied having seen Alexander on the day that he died, then claimed 2 men had killed him in a home invasion before changing her story again to self-defense. This was just a way of swaying away the attention of the media from the actual topic. Jody pleaded not guilty after being extracted from California to Arizona. This meant that she was going on a trial. Her story was weak as she kept changing it. One time, she said that she had not seen Travis since April, and the next moment, she said that she had called him 2 days before his murder. In another account, she tried to portray Travis as an abusive boyfriend and said that she killed him in her defense. All of this did not work. Finally, on May 7, 2013, Jody was found guilty of first-degree homicide and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors had sought the death penalty but didn't secure enough juror votes to achieve it. At the time, Arias expressed her preference for execution. "Death is the ultimate freedom," she said during a television interview after the verdict. "I'd rather just have my freedom as soon as I can get it." This brought justice to the family of Travis, but the void that had been left in their lives was never going to be fulfilled, as Travis was never going to come back again. Such stories make you scared of falling in love, as they seem quite horrible when it comes to their manifestations. But this is the world we live in. The case of Nicole Ford. Manipulation is a special psychological technique that allows one to achieve personal goals without considering the partner's interests. Notably, a skilled manipulator keeps people they need close to them for years, using various tactics, methods, and approaches in intimate relationships. Such manipulation usually makes the other party doubt the correctness of their decisions, feel guilty, and can significantly undermine their self-esteem. Typically, relationships with a manipulator start off ideally, as these individuals know how to gain trust, charm, and win hearts. They appear caring, understanding, empathetic, and someone with whom one can share joys and sorrows at any time. Gradually, they probe your weaknesses and begin to exploit them. Sometimes, such individuals even commit serious crimes through others in such a way that the manipulated person believes they are acting entirely of their own volition or for the greater good. The case of Nicole is not unique, but it serves as a vivid example of how a man can skillfully manipulate the emotions of women who are in love with him. He kept one lover from leaving for many years, destroying her emotional state with his actions and convincing her that she could not live without him. He persuaded another lover to commit a crime, convincing her it was a righteous act to save a child. He planned everything down to the last detail, but recordings from street surveillance cameras did not allow him to escape accountability. What is known about Nicole, or simply Nicole Ford, was born on July 11, 1989 in the northern part of the U.S. in a small town in Minnesota. There was almost no information about her parents and early life in public sources. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was very young, and her mother raised her alone, striving to provide her daughter with everything necessary and a good education. Nicole was one of the top students in her school, and she was also actively involved in sports from a young age, particularly track and field and martial arts, in which she excelled. In her senior years of school, she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to fighting crime and would serve in law enforcement. She did everything possible to successfully pass the exams and meet the physical standards required for admission to the police academy, graduating with honors. After finishing school and being admitted to the academy, Nicole moved from the small provincial town to the large metropolis of Minneapolis. In 2010, she was accepted into the Criminal Investigation Department of the main police headquarters in Minneapolis as an assistant investigator. And after several years of dedicated service, she was appointed as an investigator. Colleagues described her as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, without realizing it, Nikki became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. The perfect start to a doomed relationship. In 2012, at a Taekwondo competition, 23-year-old Nicole met a coach and martial arts master, Timothy Tim Ama, who was 8 years her senior and initially didn't spark much interest in her. However, the slender young beauty with luxurious long hair and a charming smile immediately caught his attention. It's worth noting that Timothy was known as a ladies' man with numerous romantic partners, whom he frequently changed and sometimes dated several women at the same time. He was skilled in winning over women he liked and was not accustomed to rejections. Timothy also lived in Minneapolis, quickly found out where Nikki trained, and obtained her phone number. He initially offered her personal training services, but almost immediately began courting her, quickly winning over her heart. Nicole saw Tim as a kind, open, and charming man. She developed a sincere affection for him and, before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love. Soon, they started a romantic relationship and began dating. Initially, the man behaved gallantly, showed care, and made every effort to demonstrate that he was a reliable person one could depend on. Amahara was strong, intelligent, eloquent, and had the ability to dominate the women who fell in love with him. The relationship progressed rapidly, and after a month and a half, they decided to move in together and live under the same roof. The first 6 months went wonderfully, and Nicole felt happy and loved next to this person. She opened up and trusted him, believing there were no secrets between them. However, Timothy's behavior gradually began to change. He revealed his true nature, but he did so subtly enough that his chosen one was not alarmed for quite some time. The sophisticated tormentor, Timothy was an attractive, witty, and charismatic man with a muscular build, enjoying success with the opposite gender. He took great pride in himself, and even after entering into a serious relationship, he did not stop flirting with other women, often doing so in Nicole's presence, which deeply hurt her and made her feel humiliated. At first, Nicole hoped that over time, her boyfriend would shake off his bachelor habits, become more restrained, and settle down. But months passed, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, Tim assured her that he loved only her and was passionate and tender as a partner. But outside the home, he did not miss a single opportunity to flirt and regularly engaged in affairs. Soon, Tim became openly annoyed by his girlfriend's jealousy. He began to snap at her, stating that he would behave as he wanted, and she had no right to tell him otherwise. However, he usually apologized afterward, telling Nicole that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she forgave him, continuing to make future plans. In the fall of 2014, during a minor domestic argument, Timothy unexpectedly flew into a rage, grabbed Nicole by the throat, and squeezed so hard that she couldn't breathe and almost lost consciousness. Suddenly, he came to his senses, let Nicole go, and pushed her so hard that she fell, hitting a wall. At that moment, she realized that this was an unhealthy relationship that needed to be ended immediately. However, her emotional attachment to the man was too strong, and it only took another apology from him for her to forgive him. In addition to bouts of aggression and infidelity, another extremely unpleasant trait of Tim's came to light. He was extremely jealous and obsessed with control. The man monitored every step his chosen one took her phone without permission, checked her contact lists, messages in messengers and social networks, and kept a close eye on who she talked to and where she was. This continued for several years. Tim could cause a scandal out of nowhere, unjustly accusing his beloved of infidelity, while he himself did not miss an opportunity to be unfaithful. He often resorted to physical violence, but continued to convince Nicole that no one would ever love her, as he did if she ever attempted to leave. When ending the relationship, the man resorted to blackmail, claiming that he would end his life, and it would be on her conscience. In November 2015, after another argument that ended in violence, Nicole packed her bags, and with a suitcase in hand, left the house. Timothy, who until the last moment did not believe she would do it, saw his partner leaving, chased her down outside, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back into the house. But the woman began to scream and struggle, attracting the attention of neighbors, and the man was forced to back down, letting her go. After so many years in an abusive and manipulative relationship, Nicole could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, Tim had no intention of leaving her alone. He merely switched tactics, moving from threats and blackmail back to romantic pursuits. He met her after work, sent flowers to her home, wrote messages filled with tenderness, and pleaded for a chance to start over. For over a month, Nicole was resolute and had no plans to return to her former lover. But in December of that same year, she unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant. This was certainly not in her plans, but the thought of not keeping the baby never crossed her mind. She knew that if her ex-boyfriend found out about her pregnancy, it would provide him with perfect leverage for manipulation in an attempt to win her back. So she tried to hide her pregnancy, but was unsuccessful. They still shared many mutual friends and acquaintances. So by January 2016, information about her expecting a child reached Timothy. There was no doubt about who the father was, prompting him to urge her to return to him, arguing that their child should be raised in a complete family. Nicole, who had grown up without a father herself, understood how challenging it would be for her and the baby. But she also realized that a life with a manipulative and cruel person would not lead to anything good. She adamantly refused to return to her ex-boyfriend, though she still had feelings for him. But she noted that she would allow him to participate in the life and upbringing of their child as a nominal father. On June 20th, 2016, Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy, whom she named Callahan America, as her former lover acknowledged paternity and declared his readiness to raise the child with her. However, it soon became clear that giving the baby this man's surname and registering him as the parent was far from the best idea. Despite Tim's assurances that he would be a good father, and his pleas to reunite so that Callahan could grow up in a complete family, in reality, he showed no interest in his son. The man had hoped that the child would become a reliable tool for manipulating his ex-girlfriend. But Nicole was no longer susceptible, and Amir quickly lost interest in the baby. Nicole took nearly a year of maternity leave and devoted herself entirely to caring for her little son. She hadn't even thought about new relationships, immersing herself completely in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree life with numerous lovers and casual connections. It got to the point where he had a signal, a purple light in his bedroom, which meant that the homeowner was alone and expecting company. Any of his lovers could respond to this signal, and after which the purple light would go out, signaling to others that Tim's bed was already taken. It was like something out of a red light district, but the man and his numerous partners were quite satisfied with this arrangement. In the same year of 2016, shortly after the birth of Callahan, 36-year-old Amher moved in and began living with his 18-year-old protege named Colin Ison. He had been training the young woman since she was 14, and she was deeply in love with her mentor, despite the significant age difference. Initially, the couple hid their close relationship, and to outsiders, they claimed that Colin was just renting a room in his house. However, it soon became apparent to everyone that a fiery romance was unfolding between the coach and his ward. Timothy was thrilled with his young lover, and according to friends, the girl resembled a naive child, trying her hardest to impress the man she absolutely adored. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work. She was raising her child alone, as the boy's father was hardly any help, and the young mother simply ran out of money, prompting her to end her maternity leave early. At that time, she was working as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis, and her work schedule could be unpredictable. During the day, little Callahan was in daycare. But if his mother was held up at work or called in unexpectedly, she would ask Timothy to look after their son. There were a few reasons for this. First, she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father, who had recently vowed to be involved in his upbringing. Second, since her former lover was not helping financially, she thought he could at least save her the cost of nanny services. Amma did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it, along with all related troubles, onto his young lover. Colin quickly developed a fondness for the little boy and loved taking care of him. Thus, the man dumped his parental responsibilities on the girl, explaining it by telling her that Nicole was a bad mother who did not want to care for her child and was looking for any excuse to offload her son onto them. In February, Nicole, for the first time since breaking up with Tim, entered into a romantic relationship. Her new partner was a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford. He treated his beloved with tenderness and care and also felt paternal towards Callahan, expressing readiness to adopt the boy. Everything seemed wonderful, but that was until Amar found out about his ex's new relationship. Timothy did not love Nicole and had long stopped trying to establish any relationship with her, but the mere fact that she was now not alone and happy enraged him. It also ignited a furious desire to annoy or completely destroy these relationships. As his main weapon in this endeavor, he decided to use their son as well as the naive Colin, who believed every word he said. The child's father regularly reported to social services that Donovan was beating, tormenting, and treating his son cruelly, and that the boy's mother was doing nothing to stop it. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently visited the family. They never managed to confirm any instance of domestic violence, but each time, Nicole and her new lover were interrogated like criminals. They knew who was trying to ruin their lives, but were powerless to stop it. And this continued for years. Simultaneously, Timothy kept convincing Colin that Callahan was in danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that one day, they might simply end his life in what they would claim was an accident. The girl believed her lover, felt terribly sorry for the boy who had literally grown up before her eyes, and was ready to protect him. Timothy literally harassed his ex and her new partner, threatened them, tried to provoke them, and even filed police reports, claiming that these law enforcement officers were abusing their official powers, hoping they would be fired. Donovan tried to have a man-to-man talk with Timothy, but it yielded no results. The ex-boyfriend continued to terrorize his former girlfriend and her new boyfriend, turning their lives into a real nightmare. In the battle for the little son, Tim decided not to stop at just threats and harassment, and soon took the matter to court, claiming his rights to the child and his desire for sole custody. Nicole did not anticipate this and was genuinely frightened. Knowing her ex's ability to lie and manipulate, she understood that he didn't actually want his son. He just wanted to get back at her for her happiness with Donovan. At the same time, Nicole finally decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed. She was confident that the custody issue would likely resolve in her favor. But she also realized that the legal battles could drag on for years, as Tim was not one to back down easily. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to poison his ex-girlfriend's life, concocting various fabrications. He even tried to accuse her of attempting to take his life, claiming she had tried to run him over with her car. He claimed that he managed to jump away just in time, and that Nicole only ran over his foot. Astonishingly, he took this case to court, but he couldn't prove anything since there were no witnesses, no camera footage, and importantly, no actual injury. In September 2022, the custody case went to court. The man once again tried to slander his former lover, accusing her of harming their child, and even secured support from Colin, who corroborated his story. He also tried to persuade little Callahan to say that his mom and Donovan were hitting him. But the child not only refused to lie but also revealed that his father was coaxing him to lie by promising him sweets. The court took the child's account into consideration and awarded sole custody to the mother. Nicole was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. Initially, he secured the right to see the child once a week under the mother's supervision, and later, he was allowed to spend time alone with the boy without Nicole's presence, which greatly upset and frightened her as anything could be expected from him. Ultimately, after several more court appeals and to avoid further disputes, Timothy was allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to prevent parents in conflict from encountering each other and causing further psychological damage to the children. The facility had multiple separate parking lots and separate entrances, so one parent could bring the child for the other parent to meet. But the ex-spouses did not interact or even see each other. The mysterious attacker. On April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son after another visit with his father, something unforeseen happened. She parked her car and was heading towards the entrance, but she didn't make it inside. Suddenly, a person dressed in black clothing, a mask, and a hood approached her, pulled out a gun, and shot her 4 times at close range, then quickly disappeared in an unknown direction in a black pickup. Incredibly, Nicole not only remained conscious, but also managed to dial emergency services. However, she couldn't convey anything to the dispatcher. One of the bullets hit her neck, missing the carotid artery by a millimeter and damaging her vocal cords, so she could only make gurgling sounds. At that moment, a woman who happened to witness the event came to her aid. She was just passing by when she heard the shots and saw the fleeing black figure jump into a vehicle and disappear. The woman quickly pulled over, made sure the shooter had left, and then rushed to help the victim. She was the one who explained to the dispatcher what had happened, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, saving her life. The victim spent several days teetering on the brink of life and death in a coma. She lost a lot of blood, and her vital organs were affected. But despite the severity of her injuries, doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery, and the other nearly struck her heart. The woman survived, and now it was necessary to figure out who wanted her dead. Prime suspect, Nicole had no doubt that her ex-lover was the one who had shot her, which she reported to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Earlier, while the woman was in a coma, Donovan had also informed the police that apart from Timothy, the victim had no other enemies. Timothy was indeed interrogated and checked first, but he had a solid alibi as he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. Simultaneously, the theory was investigated that someone among the criminals she had previously arrested and helped incarcerate individuals who might have organized the attack on the police officer and investigator. Undoubtedly, due to her profession, she could have had ill wishes, but Nicole herself was convinced that Timothy was involved in the assassination attempt. At the scene, 4 casings were found, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. This same vehicle was mentioned by the eyewitness, who had essentially saved the victim's life. Thus, it was necessary to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, the suspect mentioned that he had a Chevrolet Traverse SUV in his garage, and he also owned a Dodge Challenger. However, according to Timothy, he never had a pickup. Yet, the investigation showed that the man was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. Once the truth emerged, Timothy was arrested pending further investigation. When shown the surveillance footage, he recalled that he did indeed have such a vehicle, but claimed he rarely used it and it mostly sat idle. Moreover, he noted that his pickup had colorful stickers on the doors and hood. This was verified, and indeed his vehicle had stickers, but they looked as though they had been applied just recently. Nonetheless, all the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It turned out that Timothy's vehicle was equipped with a satellite navigation system, which allowed the tracing of the vehicle's entire route on that day. It was discovered that the car was brought to the back entrance of a school on the evening of April 18th. There it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced that the vehicle arrived there with license plates, but by the next evening, it left without them. The person who used the vehicle that day was of short stature, slight build, and from a distance, the silhouette appeared feminine. As a result, it was decided to immediately detain and interrogate Timothy's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search was also conducted at the couple's home, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, law enforcement discovered ammunition of the same caliber used by the shooter. The frightened girl almost immediately began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that her lover had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to radically save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating his trusting young girlfriend, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word her lover said. She felt immensely sorry for the child, and believed that Timothy wished his son well and wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that her lover had provided her with the firearm and had taken the pistol back after the assassination attempt and disposed of it, but she did not know what exactly he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, a point that the defendant's lawyers emphasized. Nevertheless, the decisive factor was Colin's confession, who still could not believe that her lover had deceived her, and believed that they were committing a righteous act. The court also considered the testimony of the victim herself about what kind of person Timothy was, and how skillfully he had always managed to manipulate the women who loved him. 42-year-old Timothy was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, the maximum term for such cases. 24-year-old Colin Larson, as the executor, received 16 years in prison. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole managed to fully recover physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and the man became the best father Callahan could ever wish for. The now married couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life then will be the child's godmother. Finally, it should be added that Timothy, with good behavior, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. The case of Lauren Giddings. Lauren Teresa Giddings was born on April 18, 1984, in Tacoma Park, Maryland. She grew up with her two older sisters, Sarah and Caitlin. Her parents, Karen and William, maintained a warm and friendly atmosphere in the family. From a young age, she was always studious and religious. She was a member of St. Mary's Catholic Church and attended church from kindergarten through high school. In February 2002, at the age of 18, Lauren graduated from high school. That same year, she went to Georgia to attend an academy, where she studied until February 2006. After leaving the academy, she returned home and worked at the National Public Policy Center in Washington. In February 2008, she returned to Georgia to study law at Mercer University. Lauren was a blue-eyed, blonde with an athletic build who loved nature and animals, especially her pet dog, a Pekingese. Her relatives described her as a kind person who respected others' opinions. Sarah later noted that during college, Lauren transformed from a shy person into an active young woman with many friends. She was the pride of her family, and they had high hopes for her. However, her move to Georgia set off a series of unfortunate incidents that led to a tragic end. Mercer University is located in Macon, a city in central Georgia, right across from Lauren's dorm. Most of the people living in the dormitories were university students, and they usually knew each other. Among them was Stephen Mark McDaniel, who lived near Lauren's room and was also in law school. Both were members of the Federalist Society, an organization of some 60,000 lawyers, including both students and practicing professionals. Lauren served as president of the society, while Stephen served as vice president. This was their only relationship. Stephen was known to be quiet. He was not very social and rarely drank. Lauren, on the other hand, was very attractive, had many interests, and maintained a busy schedule. Before they met at university, Stephen and Lauren had very different lives. Stephen was born on September 9, 1985, in Atlanta, Georgia. His parents, Glenda and William, worked in a factory. He was a bright child who valued cleanliness and organization. Until he was 13, he sang in the church choir in his hometown. Stephen aspired to write a novel, pursue a career in criminal law, and ultimately become a federal judge. After completing high school, he enrolled in law school in February 2008, where he met Lauren. He had worked up the courage to ask her out a few times, but Lauren had kindly declined, explaining that she was dating David, a lawyer from Atlanta, who was 20 years her senior. They started dating in February 2007, before she went to college, when she interned at the law firm where he worked. After she moved to Georgia, David followed her, and their relationship continued. To discourage Stephen from pursuing her, Lauren mentioned that she and David planned to leave the city after graduation and live together. On May 31st, Lauren fulfilled one of her biggest dreams, graduating with a Juris Doctorate. Her next goal was to obtain a license to practice as a lawyer, which required passing a challenging exam. As she prepared for the exam, everything went smoothly, and she felt confident about her future. However, she knew she would soon need to leave the city. Stephen silently accepted this fact. On the surface, he appeared calm, but in his mind, he had other plans. In June, Caitlin got married in Maryland, and Lauren attended the wedding. Soon after, she returned to her dormitory in Georgia to focus on studying for her upcoming exams. On the evening of June 25th, David received an email from Lauren. In the email, she mentioned feeling uneasy and sensing that something strange was happening in her house that reminded her of a similar experience she had over a year ago. At the time, she told her sister, Caitlin, that she suspected someone had broken into her home and gone through her belongings. At this point, Lauren's family and friends knew she was busy studying for exams, so they weren't worried when she stopped communicating. The last time anyone saw her was on Saturday, June 25th, at a store. Caitlin sent her a few messages but didn't think much about the lack of response. Caitlin believed she was too busy to respond. It wasn't until Wednesday evening, June 29th, that David and her relatives began to worry because she had been silent for so long. David called Caitlin to ask if she had heard from Lauren, which worried her, as she had also tried to contact Lauren to no avail. She then contacted some of Lauren's friends, but no one had any information. Ashley, a friend of Lauren's, went to knock on her room, but no one answered, and it was quiet inside. Curious, she looked for Lauren's car and found it missing. The 2004 Mitsubishi was usually parked where Lauren always left it. Ashley remembered that Lauren had shown her where the spare key was in case of an emergency, so she used it to get into the apartment. Everything was in order. Lauren's personal belongings, phone, wallet, passport, and computer, were in their usual places. Only Lauren was missing. While everyone was frantically searching for Lauren and trying to find clues about her whereabouts, Stephen entered the apartment. He stayed for a while to observe and chat with a few people before leaving. Ashley then discovered that Lauren's phone was dead, so she plugged it in to charge. Once the phone turned on, she checked it and saw that the last calls were made on June 25th, 4 days earlier. Realizing it was time to involve the authorities, she called 911. A few minutes later, police officers from Mercer University arrived and relayed the information to the Macon police. After midnight, police officers, along with Lauren's friends and neighbors, began searching for her. At 3 a.m., after a thorough check of the dormitory area, the police left without any news about Lauren. Caitlin became worried and decided to inform her parents. Her father quickly got in the car and drove to Macon to file a missing person report. After her father filed the report, the detectives began their investigation. They drove to the dormitory where Lauren lived but couldn't find a parking space, so they parked in front of a dumpster. When investigators entered Lauren's room, they used luminol, a chemical that can detect blood, to conduct a test. They sprayed luminol on the walls, floors, and some objects in Lauren's living room, kitchen, and bedroom. However, Things took a turn for the worse when they entered the bathroom and found the floor reacting violently to the luminol. At this point, everyone realized this was a crime scene and that something terrible had happened to Lauren. Meanwhile, friends and family continued to search for her. When interviewing Stephen, he described Lauren as a good and honest person but admitted that he did not know where she was. According to Stephen, she had gone jogging and was attacked by a criminal. At the time he was sharing this, a garbage truck arrived. However, they were unable to collect the trash because a police car had parked in the wrong place and blocked the entrance to the trash bin. This was a pivotal moment that helped investigators quickly uncover the truth about what had happened to Lauren. Several detectives, having found nothing in Lauren's apartment and returning to their car, suddenly sensed a foul odor. It was the smell of death. They traced the odor to the garbage containers and began to investigate them. Inside one black plastic bag, they discovered a decomposing human torso. After examining it, the detectives concluded that it was likely the remains of a female, probably belonging to Lauren. While Stephen was talking to a reporter, a press officer interrupted to announce that the police had just discovered a body in a trash can behind the house. Initially confused and silent for a few seconds, Stephen then asked again about the body. He stammered that he needed to sit down, turned away from the camera, walked a short distance, and sat down near some bushes. Throughout this, the media operator captured his reactions. He appeared pale and was visibly shaking. Then, on the night of June 30th, Stephen voluntarily went to the police station to provide a statement. The questioning lasted for 12 long hours. When asked about Lauren, he said he always noticed when she left or entered the dormitory. Even though he did not speak to her directly, he could hear or see her passing by his window. Furthermore, he claimed that he was always aware of all the activities in the dormitory. After being questioned, Stephen allowed the police into his home, including his bedroom, where they discovered a rope, several weapons, blood-stained blue gloves, a master key to open the apartment door, and a pair of women's underwear. The investigators also seized Stephen's car, where they found more bloodstains. They found his computer, which contained conversations on a blog under the alias Sun. In this blog, he wrote about women and violence. In another post, Stephen discussed a situation that seemed to involve Lauren. He mentioned that he had been consumed by thoughts of one person for a long time, someone he wanted to protect from harm. If given the chance, he would have fought against anything that could hurt her without hesitation. But his mental struggles prevented him from doing so. He couldn't even confess his feelings to her, leaving him to watch her from afar. On Stephen's computer, many compromising photos were discovered, including pictures of Lauren. Additionally, a hacksaw with bloodstains was found in the tool cabinet, suggesting that a disturbing situation had occurred. Detectives concluded that Stephen had committed a heinous crime against Lauren. The evidence collected was sufficient to officially arrest Stephen McDaniel on July 2, 2011. On July 6th, DNA tests showed that body parts found in a trash can belonged to Lauren. In August 2011, Stephen was charged with murder. Police thoroughly searched the dormitory and surrounding areas for other body parts but found nothing more. Despite overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence during the early stages of his detention. After examining the contents of Stephen's computer, investigators discovered that he had been monitoring Lauren's social media accounts. In addition to the murder charge on August 23rd, Stephen was charged with 7 more counts and was ordered to post bail of $850,000, a huge amount of money for him and his family. In February 2013, the prosecutor's office announced that they would not seek the death penalty at the request of Lauren's family. In 2014, just a week before his trial, Stephen surprised everyone by pleading guilty. The decision to plead guilty was part of a deal with prosecutors in which he agreed to accept responsibility for Lauren's death in exchange for dropping several other charges against him. Nearly 3 years after her murder, he recounted what really happened. Stephen said that on the morning of June 26th, he entered Lauren's apartment while she was sleeping. He sat on her bed to watch her. When she woke up and saw him, she tried to stay calm and pleaded with him not to hurt her. Instead of leaving, he grabbed Lauren by the neck and squeezed tightly. She fought back desperately to escape. They both fell to the floor, and her legs got trapped under the bed, which worked to Stephen's advantage since she couldn't kick him. However, she managed to hit him with her hands and pulled off his mask. Fear engulfed her when she realized the attacker was her neighbor, Stephen, a fellow law student and vice president of the same organization she led. Once a shy and reserved guy who had asked her out, he had transformed into a terrifying figure. He violently grabbed her by the neck in an attempt to strangle her. Despite Lauren's desperate pleas for him to stop, he ignored her cries and continued to tighten his grip for several minutes. When she fell still, he released her at 4:30 a.m. Stephen then dragged Lauren's body into the bathroom, placed her in the bathtub, and returned to his apartment. There, he spent the day on his computer. He eventually returned to Lauren's apartment with a hacksaw. Without hesitation, he began wrapping the body parts in black bags and throwing them into various trash cans around the dormitory. He kept her torso for 2 more days before dumping it in a container outside the building, where police later discovered it. Stephen reported that within 48 hours of the crime, he had disposed of the mask and shirt stained with Lauren's blood. When questioned about the motive for the murder, he confessed to being obsessed with Lauren since they met. He revealed that he had been spying on her for months, using a setup to observe her without her noticing. Stephen also admitted that he had carefully researched methods to avoid detection. Thanks to this, he was able to use the master key he had stolen from the dormitory manager to enter Lauren's room. She was about to become a lawyer, something she had always dreamed of throughout her life. However, she had no idea that Stephen, who had been secretly watching her, would completely transform her life. After a trial in 2014, Stephen Mark McDaniel was convicted of a violent crime and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. After receiving the verdict, he began to do everything he could to regain his freedom. Despite admitting guilt, he maintained that he did not abuse Lauren. Stephen also shared with investigators his irrational belief that Lauren was still alive. He claimed to have a split personality, which he said made it difficult for him to explain his actions. Yet he continued to follow his daily routine. He expressed feelings of remorse and stated that he missed Lauren greatly, but he understood that he could not expect forgiveness from her family. In 2018, Stephen's father set up an online fundraising page to hire a lawyer for his son's defense. However, the campaign was met with strong opposition from Lauren's family and friends, leading to its immediate cancellation. As a result, Stephen was forced to represent himself at the hearing. He argued that his rights were violated in the original sentence. Additionally, he criticized his previous lawyers for not defending him adequately, but his request for a review was denied. He subsequently appealed to the Supreme Court of Georgia and then to the Supreme Court of the United States, but both appeals were rejected. In January 2022, as well as in May and December of that year, he attempted to have his trial reviewed but was unsuccessful. In January 2023, nearly 9 years after pleading guilty, he filed another appeal seeking to reduce his parole eligibility period. This time, he submitted a petition to the federal district court. But as before, his appeal was denied. Stephen's mother struggled to accept the painful reality of her son's involvement in the murder. His grandfather expressed deep sadness, reflecting on the 25 years during which he had been proud of his grandson but now found it hard to recognize him. During a visit to the facility where Stephen was held, the grandfather felt as if he were seeing a different person. Overwhelmed with despair, he left and chose not to visit Stephen again. Lauren's relatives found some comfort in the belief that Stephen would eventually realize the significance of his actions during his time in prison, which might lead to his repentance. Caitlin, her sister, honored Lauren by naming one of her daughters after her. The family continues to celebrate Lauren's birthday and maintains a tradition of wearing pink clothes on Wednesdays, just as Lauren had during her life. Lauren's tragic fate is a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant when sensing danger. In Lauren's case, the threat was not only visible but also close at hand, as she fell victim to someone who appeared harmless. This incident not only destroyed her dreams but also broke the hearts of her loved ones.